Welcome to today's Explainer. When we try to figure out how the country is actually doing financially, we almost always look at traditional indicators, things like GDP, unemployment rates, the big stuff. And while those metrics provide incredibly valuable data, let's be honest, they can feel super distant and abstract. They're just really difficult to interpret in our day-to-day lives. So today, we are going to explore a much more relatable metric. In fact, it's something you probably have sitting in a bag or a bathroom cabinet right this second.
It sounds kind of like magic, doesn't it? We really have to ask ourselves, can lipstick actually predict an economic crash? It is a genuine mystery how something as simple as cosmetics could possibly act as a crystal ball for the entire economy. But as we're going to see, human consumer behavior hides some absolutely fascinating secrets.
Section 1. The Lipstick Paradox. Let's dive right into this. To find the origins of this whole idea, we actually need to rewind back to the incredibly turbulent year of 2001. Early in the year, the economy took a massive hit with the dot-com crash, and that was obviously followed by the tragic events of September 11th. Well, late that year, Leonard Lauder, an executive at the cosmetics giant Estee Lauder, decided to analyze customer behavior in the wake of these crises. And he was the very first person to suggest that lipstick sales data could serve as a surprising indicator of the overall health of the economy. Just definitely not in the way you might assume.
See, the paradox here completely defies common sense. I mean, logic tells us that when the economy is booming and disposable income is high, people buy more things, right? Including lipstick. But Lauder found the exact opposite. Weak economies actually lead to spiking sales. It completely flips our logical expectations on their head at first glance. Why on earth would people buy more of a completely unnecessary item when times are really tough?
Section 2. The economics of choice.
To answer that question, we really have to look under the hood of human decision-making. Nothing in our economy exists in a vacuum. It all comes down to what economists call opportunity cost. Basically, this is the principle stating that when we buy one thing, we forego another. Because our resources are finite, money doesn't grow on trees after all, every single purchase we make involves a trade-off.
Think about it like figuring out what you want for dinner tonight. If you choose to buy a burger, you are actively choosing not to buy the steak. The resources you spent on that burger are now gone, meaning the steak is officially off the table. This simple, everyday principle of trade-offs applies to absolutely everything we spend money on. And yes, that includes cosmetics.
Section 3. The Substitution Effect.
So how do we take that concept of trade-offs and connect it directly back to what consumers want during hard economic times? Well, here is the crucial point. People have a fundamental hardwired desire to consume. And that desire? It doesn't just vanish into thin air because the economy is struggling. What does disappear is disposable income. So, as budgets get tighter, consumers start shifting their spending. They still desperately want to treat themselves, but they have to do it in a way that aligns with their new financial reality. Instead of splurging on a massive luxury item, like, say, a designer handbag, they opt for a smaller, much more affordable indulgence. They buy a lipstick.
Economists actually have a formal term for this psychological shift, the substitution effect. At the very heart of the lipstick index is the reality that economic downturns create immense, terrifying uncertainty about the future. People hold back on large, risky purchases, but they are still actively seeking out little ways to indulge themselves. So, they substitute the super expensive items with much cheaper options.
And the lipstick index isn't just about makeup either. As budgets tighten up, consumers adjust their spending to match their means across the board. This creates an absolute boom for what economists somewhat unfairly call inferior goods. Now, don't let the name fool you. It just means goods that see a surge in demand as our incomes fall. This substitution effect totally explains why everyday industries like fast food restaurants, movie theaters, and other affordable little luxuries actually tend to perform incredibly well during recessions.
A lot of people assume that during a recession, fewer folks visit cinemas because they're cutting back on entertainment. But the absolute opposite is true. Cash-strapped consumers might not be able to afford a lavish night out at a five-star restaurant anymore, so they substitute. They flock to a budget-friendly night at the movies instead. It is the exact same economic principle that Lauder observed with makeup.
Section 4. The Investor's Dilemma.
Now, this theory is incredibly sound, and it explains human behavior perfectly. But let's bring this back to reality for a second. Unfortunately, for anyone hoping to make a quick buck off this knowledge, we hit a pretty major roadblock.
There is absolutely no government agency out there frantically updating the public on how well Estee Lauder's red lipstick sold this Tuesday. That data is closely guarded corporate information. It's definitely not a publicly available real-time ticker.
The dilemma becomes crystal clear when we weigh our options. Traditional indicators like GDP and unemployment are public and available to all of us, even if they feel a bit distant and academic. Lipstick sales, on the other hand, they are highly relatable and rooted in rock-solid economic theory, but the data is completely private. Because it lacks that timely public data, the lipstick index isn't going to provide any actionable insights for your personal stock portfolio. It is a brilliantly clever observational tool, but a terrible one to actually trade on.
Yet, despite that glaring limitation for investors, the core truth of this explainer really remains. A country's lipstick consumption truly can predict its downfall. It just shows us how predictably we all seek out comfort when things get tough, which leaves me with a question for you to think about. When you feel your own budget tightening, what affordable indulgences do you substitute in? What is the lipstick hiding in your own spending habits? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time as we continue to unpack the fascinating world around us.